Thank you. Sarah, that was amazing. I have no idea how you said so many words in 20 minutes. I am not going to match that performance. I kind of go off on tangents all the time, so I'm going to try and keep focused and tell you what I came here to tell you. What I'm going to talk about is the kinds of attacks that we've seen over the course of 2024, some specific victims, some very specific numbers, but it's leading up to, I think, 5 key takeaways. And what has happened entirely by accident is that my 5 key takeaways are kind of summarizing everything I've heard today. So that's really nice. It was not designed that way. So some notable events that we saw over the course of last year. Obviously there's more than this, but these were things that stood out for different reasons. One of the things that I am very keen on pushing the importance of is threat modeling. And its importance in designing effective cybersecurity strategies. And sometimes we tend to focus on, when we think of threat modeling, people tend to focus on, okay, so cybercrime, state-aligned actors, hacktivism, I'll put that all in my threat model. But who had CrowdStrike in their threat model, right? Or a similar event to what happened to CrowdStrike. Sarah already touched on what it was. I'm sure some people in the room suffered as a result of that. 8.5 million Windows systems around the world, I think was the number, right? Affected by the CrowdStrike outage. Court cases, legal cases, financial damages, and everything that goes along with it. Of course, it's really bad news for CrowdStrike, but it was much worse news for the businesses that were unable to carry on doing business as a result of that failure. I ended up finding out that I'm friends with the president of CrowdStrike, that we used to work together like 20 years ago, and I had no idea where he'd gone until he popped up on the news, and I went, oh, it's you. And I messaged him on LinkedIn, hi, how are you? Not very well. And in the same industry, but in a very different way, Kaspersky threw up a couple of surprises last year. Obviously, being a Russian organization, they found themselves on the wrong side of politics, in the West anyway. They made it onto the list in the US, which means that it's forbidden to install Kaspersky on government systems. Actually, it's forbidden to install on government systems in the UK as well, and various other countries. So that drove Kaspersky to the point. I told you tangents, here comes a tangent. Here's an interesting Eugene Kaspersky story. He was also asked to be an advisor to Europol's EC3 when the thing was first founded. And I think there was about 8 of us to begin with when it first started. And one direct quote from him as he sat in the room with Europol and with a bunch of us, he said, there are no Russian cyber criminals, they're all Ukrainian. I was like, jaw on the floor, like, you won't be invited back, Eugene, if you're saying things like that. Anyway, so Kaspersky ended up shutting down their US operations completely, just pulled out of the US market, sold their operations to a company, I think they were called Point Wild, and just exited that market. In September of last year, Kaspersky customers in the US found that Kaspersky had been remotely removed from their machines and remotely replaced with a completely different product called Ultra AV. Many of them said they received no notification whatsoever. But what it serves as is an object lesson of how wide and all-encompassing your threat model needs to be, at least your thinking while you're threat modeling. Who would have had, my security provider has the ability to remotely uninstall something I have and install something with the capabilities and access that an antivirus system has? Part of your threat model now. It's happened. And the Internet Archive, you remember the attack on the Internet Archive earlier this year? It pissed off a lot of people. Am I allowed to say pissed off in the RSA? Yeah, good, because I did. Because it was, it's the Internet Archive. Who attacks the Internet Archive? Well, 2 people at the same time is actually what happened. So there was a Palestinian-aligned hacktivist group that attacked them with a DDoS, and there was a cyber criminal threat actor who, using an identity-based attack, and that's something also to bear in mind with threat modeling. It's not just human identities. What you will see over the course of 2025 is a significant increase in what they call NHI attacks, non-human identities. So auth tokens and identities embedded in configuration files that are exposed in cloud instances, for example, and are then abused in an attack, which is exactly what happened to the Internet Archive. So as well as being DDoSed, they lost the data on, I think, 33 million users of their services. So it's not all about cybercrime. That's the point of that first slide. But cybercrime itself is having a significant and growing supply chain impact. And here are just some of the examples of supply chain attacks and supply chain impacts of 2024. Change Healthcare, I'm sure many of you followed the news around that attack, the insurance and finance provider for a lot of US healthcare. 94% of US hospitals were impacted by the attack on Change Healthcare. As a supply chain attack, a supply chain impact, that's about as big as it gets. They've ended up dispersing, I think, $3.3 billion to affected hospitals. But as a result of that attack, insurance claims were unable to be processed. Procedures were unable to go ahead in hospital because obviously the US healthcare system is very, let's say, financially motivated. New claims couldn't be processed, new insurance couldn't be added, so it had a huge and ongoing impact into real human life, prescriptions, surgical treatment, and the financial well-being of those healthcare institutions as well. And a much more local example, Synovis, which is a blood testing, they process blood tests on behalf of a significant group of predominantly London-based hospitals. They had a ransomware attack. As a result of that ransomware attack, their operating capability was reduced to 10% of normal. And if you're in the business of doing blood tests, you can guess what kind of impact that's having in the real world. To the extent that they were issuing an emergency appeal for O-negative blood, the magic blood that everybody can have, because they couldn't do tests to determine someone in need of a transfusion to determine their blood type. So it's real human life impact from a supply chain cascade, if you like. And then we saw attacks on Sisense and Snowflake. Sisense is a business intelligence platform where you can create dashboards and pull data from all of your other services and create all of this wonderful intellectual property and insight based on all of this data, except when that provider gets attacked, the knock-on effect of that is that you need to go and change the credentials for every other service that you were pulling into Sisense, and you have to notify all of those individuals that all of their data is at risk because the Sisense platform was compromised. And as a result of that, they had access into any platform that their customers had connected to Sisense. And Snowflake was huge. It's another kind of business intelligence platform, but I think 165 customer organizations of Snowflake were exposed as a result of the attack. The attackers ended up stealing data from people like Santander. I don't know who's in the room, so if I mention you, it's not deliberate. Santander, Ticketmaster, God, there were loads of them. They ended up using that stolen data to extort, so effectively the same outcome as a modern ransomware attack without encryption. They extorted more than 2.7 million, I think. And when you think, who's doing this kind of thing? Is it Russia? Is it China? Is it Iran? This is some guy in Canada. They're pretty sure it's one or two individuals, Canadian nationals based in Canada, just doing it for the money. Don't ever forget that cybercrime is a truly global phenomenon. So let's deep dive on ransomware a little bit, and Change Healthcare, unfortunately, is kind of the poster child of ransomware for 2024. So they were compromised. Ransomware attack, as you know, huge downstream impact. They were compromised by a threat actor or a ransomware as a service operator called Black Cat or ALF-V, depending on who's doing the naming, same group. The affiliate of Black Cat, it's easier to say than ALF-V, the affiliate demanded a $22 million ransom based on the data that had been stolen from Change Healthcare. I don't know what the negotiation started at, but it ended at 22 million, and Change Healthcare paid that ransom. They paid the ransom of 22 million to Alf V. 10 minutes? Shit. To Alf V. And of course, this activity had raised even further the interest of law enforcement. And what very quickly happened was this, which was great. That actually law enforcement acted against Black Cat, seized the infrastructure, and started to gather intelligence. They were, looking into who are the affiliates, who are the threat actors behind the group. But then this happened, which was less great. And this kind of went backwards and forwards, I think, 4 times. Like, seriously? All the time, remember, this threat actor has 22 million plus in the bank because they haven't paid their affiliate yet. And then what happened? They did what's called an exit scam. They went, oh no, law enforcement got us, we're dead. Sneak off the stage. And they didn't pay their affiliate the 22 million. So the ransomware as a service operators walked away with all of the money and said, oh, they busted us, sorry everybody. So this is the complaint from the person that actually breached Change Healthcare, posting on, I think it was Ramp, posted in Ramp forum, to a Russian cybercrime forum, saying, hey, this is an exit scam, they haven't really been busted, they didn't pay me my money, be careful everyone and stop dealing with Alf V. And then this guy, this threat actor, moved off to another ransomware as a service platform. This is the timeline as the research team at Forescout discovered it is, they were compromised in February, they paid the ransom in March. Ransom Hub claimed its first victim as a new ransomware as a service operator in February, and by April the 8th, the guy who was complaining about being ripped off for his 22 million has moved to Ransom Hub and said, by the way, Change Healthcare, still got your data. Give me a ransom. Now, that data has never been released. So the only probable outcome, being careful with my words, the only probable outcome is that they had to pay a second ransom to make sure that that data was not released. Ransomware is huge business. If you look at the notable groups of last year, Ransom Hub emerged very quickly from March or February onwards as the #1 in terms of amount of claimed victims over the course of 2024. So they've claimed 593 separate victims. You can read the numbers for yourself. But what for me is really significant about this is that these are not all new threat actors. Even though, most of the dates are new. Ransom Hub is 24. Most of the others, well, all of them are 2021 or later. Because in many cases, it's the same people. So if I look at the list, Akira, as a group, have significant infrastructure and code overlap with an older ransomware group called Conti. So they're almost certainly the same threat actors or associated threat actors as Conti. Black Basta is related to Conti. Hunters International, which is a relatively new one, they purchased the Hive ransomware from another group and re-engineered it. Black Suit is Royal. So if you ever heard of Royal ransomware before, that's Black Suit. It's the same people rebranding. In fact, Ink Ransom, we believe they're in the process of rebranding as Lynx right now. So this goes on and on. So here's a slide with a really big number. Thank you. Any idea what that number is? Something ransomware, something money. It is a big number. It's the number of individuals who have had their identities breached in 2024 alone. The number of people. And that's just from me going online and thinking, oh, there was that breach, that breach, that breach, the biggest breaches, find them, get the numbers, make a spreadsheet, which I'm happy to show you, total up the column and say, that's, of course there'll be people that figure in more than one breach. There aren't going to be that many that will make a significant difference. So let's say, there's 1.3 billion identities breached just last year. Now, given that an identity for sale on an underground forum will go between $5 and $15, depending on how much information there is, if it's what they call fulls, it can go between $20 and $35, like with IDs and social securities and addresses and so on. A super conservative estimate of the value of just last year's data is about $7 billion US. That's how much money is flowing through this economy on an annual basis. Although there was a really big breach last year of National Public Data, who do background checks in the US, financial, criminal records, that kind of stuff. 170 million people were impacted by the breach of National Public Data, 170 million. And the threat actor tried to sell that data for $3.5 million US. Nobody wanted it. 170 million people. Nobody wanted it, no sale. They dumped the whole lot for free online. Info stealers made a big comeback last year as a service, info stealers as a service. This is an advertisement from one of the underground forums. You can see the kind of levels of as a service that are offered for amateurs or professionals. Big ones are Llama, Formbook or Xloader, Vidar. There was an excellent takedown activity of a Redline info stealer last year by law enforcement. But all that means, just like with ransomware, is those threat actors go away. The infrastructure's gone, but the threat actors go away, regroup, rename, learn the lessons, and re-emerge. And info stealing used to be rife. It kind of bubbled under for a very long time. It's having a huge resurgence now because identities. What are you going to do with stolen info? You're going to have an identity. What are you going to do with identity? Carry out further attacks. When it comes to 0 days, it's often a good barometer of how the threat landscape can be expected to evolve. We saw 94 new 0-day vulnerabilities over the course of 2024. Slightly less than 2023, which was 98, but that was the most ever. So when we say it's slightly less than the prior year, it's still way up there. What we're seeing a lot with 0 days and their use, so in 2023 we saw things like file transfer applications being targeted by ransomware operators, 0-day vulnerabilities in those. What we saw over the course of 2024 was edge device attacks. We were seeing vulnerabilities in Ivanti, in Fortinet, Palo, Cisco. All of these edge devices are fantastic jumping off points for a threat actor into a corporate environment. They enjoy a very privileged position, and in many cases they're completely invisible to your security stack. Can you run an agent on your Ivanti edge device, on your Cisco edge device? No, you can't. Is CrowdStrike going to be looking after your Fortinet appliances? No, it's not. Threat actors know this. As soon as there's a vulnerability out there, it will be reverse engineered. It will be exploited in the wild. And 0 days obviously just come out of the blue anyway. So whether it's a published vulnerability on a Patch Tuesday equivalent for one of these vendors, or whether it's a 0 day that's been discovered and exploited before the vendor knows about it, this is huge now, attacks on edge devices, because of that privileged position they occupy in your network. So if you're not taking that infrastructure into account in your security planning, the threat actors are. So they're already ahead of you. And in addition to that, we've seen a lot of IoT stuff being recruited into botnets, Quad7, Mirai, GAFGit, many of them. A lot of that is used for password spraying attacks, Sarah mentioned, and also for obfuscation of attacks. Really the masters of this right now are the Chinese. It's really been typhoon season in 2024. Volt Typhoon, Salt Typhoon, Flax Typhoon, most recently Silk Typhoon were implicated in the Office of Foreign Asset Control attacks in the US. Volt Typhoon, pre-positioning for taking down critical national infrastructure in the event of necessity, conflict. Salt Typhoon, espionage, particularly of telecoms operations, even to the extent of abusing the installed legitimate wiretap systems. Flax Typhoon, obfuscation, building botnets of compromised IoT devices to hide the true origin of attacks. And you've heard a lot about Russia and the consequences of the war in Ukraine. We obviously, since the full-scale invasion, the war itself has been ongoing, for 10 years, but since the full-scale invasion, there was a huge deployment of wipers, of ransomware on both sides, actually. We saw a group called the Partisans of Belarusia deploying modified ransomware against servers that controlled the railway system in Belarus and just taking those servers out of commission so troops and material couldn't be moved through Belarusian railways. But what we really have seen in huge numbers is hacktivist attacks against operational technology and CNI. People are being, 1 minute, run, Ferguson. People are being recruited and volunteering into hacktivist attacks against non-traditional endpoints, operational technology, critical national infrastructure. So we now live in a world where fingers on a keyboard at one end of an attack chain results in explosions, fire, and real kinetic damage at the other end. These are tweets from GhostSec and Thraxman, who is part of the One Fist hacktivist group. Both are attacks against Russia. This was an attack against an electricity substation. Hacked in, changed parameters, caused an explosion. This was an attack against a vehicle repair facility. And they're just a couple of examples. The major takeaway from this is, if we put aside the invasion of Ukraine, if that's possible, if we put that aside in our mental model for a second, when that war is over, when Russia is pushed out of Ukraine, these threat actors and these skills will still exist in our world. This genie doesn't go back into any bottles. This is absolutely part of your threat model. You think about operational technology and what's the problem. I don't have the full year figures for 2024, so I'm using 23. There were over 2,000 vulnerability advisories for ICS equipment in 2023. And of those advisories, you can see 27% of them had no patch. And of those 27%, 18% of them had no mitigation either. So the advisory is an open invitation. Very often you don't have a combined security team across IT and OT. Very often those teams, if they exist, don't even like each other. One says, when was the last time you wore a hard hat? The other one says, when was the last time you secured anything? And that's kind of the dynamic between those teams. You need, as cybersecurity professionals, to get a handle on this as an integrated or at least complementary security environment, because the attackers are already interested. The truth is that cybersecurity today kind of looks like this in a lot of instances. Because you're drowning in data. There was a survey from Palo Alto about what's the average number of alerts that a SOC is dealing with in a 24-hour period. They surveyed a large number of organizations. The average number they came up with was 11,000 alerts in a 24-hour period. 11,000 alerts in a 24-hour period. Let's say it takes you 30 minutes to do the triage. Right? Is it a false positive, false negative? Is it correctly classified? Is it a duplicate? All of that stuff. Say 30 minutes work to do the triage. 11,000 alerts, 30 minutes per alert, is 5,500 hours of work to do in a 24-hour period, which would mean that you would need a SOC team of 687 people, 3 8-hour shifts, just to do the triage. Hands up who has a SOC team of 687 people? No, right. If you want to put it in context, this is an arena that holds about 10,000 people, so not quite the 11,000. And you're asking your SOC team, which probably is not as numerous as the people on the court, to positively identify every single individual within the audience, make sure they're sitting in the right seat and that they didn't bring anything in with them that they were not supposed to bring in, and that nobody swapped seats when your back was turned. Every day, every 24 hours, and every day it's a new crowd in the arena. If data is the new oil, which I'm sure you've heard people say on many, many occasions, then algorithms are the new refineries. It's what we do with that data to turn it into useful, actionable intelligence that really counts. So I'm sure you've all been called the Department of No. It's a very old cybersecurity. No, you can't have cloud. No, you can't bring your own device. No, you must unplug that access point under your desk. All of those things, right? So if cybersecurity is the Department of No, I want to leave you with 5 no's that you can take away with you. And like I said, it kind of sums up the day really nicely. So the 5 no's of cybersecurity are these. Know your threat model. Understand what you have, how it works, how it can be abused and misused. Know your enemy. Which threat actors are targeting your verticals, are targeting your competitors, are targeting you? And what are their TTPs? MITRE ATT&CK is a great resource for this kind of thing. If you understand how they're being successfully attacked, you can build a better defense. Know your appetite, your risk appetite. It is not credible to expect you to stop every attack, but it is credible to expect you to make risk-based decisions. Doing nothing is a perfectly acceptable strategy as long as it's a risk-based decision to do nothing. So understand your risk appetite on an individual, system, organizational, corporate level. And when you know your appetite, then you must be able to measure and understand your security posture. How do you line up to this appetite? Where do you need to improve? What do you need to change? And that's on a dynamic basis. And finally, know your limits. None of us are capable of all things all the time. So understand where you need a partnership. Understand where you need a technology partner, a solutions partner, a SOC partner, whatever it might be, or even an insurance partner if you want to offset something. But understand what you can do and what you can't do, whether that's technically, whether that's a skills-based thing, or whether that's a financial thing, and operate within those parameters. That's it. Thank you very much. You can go and have beer now.
Any questions?
Any questions? Oh no, here. Any questions? Oh, that was better. Shout!
Hi, thank you very much for a very nice presentation. Excellent.
Thank you.
You know, you were talking about that, IoT devices, right?
Yeah.
You're definitely right. But the thing is, that's the thing, that over the past many years since IoT devices were introduced, okay, to the world basically, I mean, since then, I think either the technology sector has basically either ignored the actual security black spot or black box spotting that, or maybe the fact is that we don't really give a two hoots about it as such. Because if, for example, we really did care a two hoot about it, we would probably say to the manufacturers, you make sure your security device is completely secure, otherwise it's not going to be put onto the main networks.
Yeah, and we're seeing legislation to that effect, definitely within the EU.
Yep.
And there were moves towards that kind of legislation in the US. There's the carrying the kite mark that it's been designed with security in mind. So secure by design, secure by default. These are executive order requirements. But I think the most relevant point out of all the words that you said is blind spot. And I think that's at the root of it, is that in your security stack within your organization, do you see the IP cameras? Are they visible in your SOC? Do you see the DVRs? Do you see the VoIP systems? Do you even see the hypervisors that are running your critical instances, or do you just see the instances? And I think that's the thing. It's not quite head in the sand, but it's a lack of awareness that infrastructure beyond the places where you can install an agent exists. Threat actors know about it, but if you're not seeing it every single day, and in particular if your SOC is not seeing it every single day, then they've got plenty other stuff, 11,000 alerts every 24 hours, to focus their attention on. And unless you discover that you have been compromised through unmanaged devices, because it's not just IoT, right, it's unmanaged devices, then your focus will be elsewhere. The vast majority of a cybersecurity spend, a budget within an organization, is given to IT. 90-something%, I would guess, is spent on IT security. Not on anything else, not on facilities security, not on
definitely agree with that.
production line security, not on moving the luggage around Heathrow Airport security, but it should be.
Thank you very much.
This gentleman in the front right, he's got a mic already. Is that your mic? Did you bring that with you?
I was given it earlier, but I don't know if it's still on. Angus McRae, King's College London. Thank you.
One of my best friends at school was called Angus McRae, and we have chatted online, I believe.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you for another insightful talk. I was curious, asking a few people this at the moment, as to what your view is on the current UK government's proposal to criminalise ransomware payments.
I have a strong view on that.
Do you think it will be a welcome thing, or do you think it could be counterproductive and drive it further?
I think counterproductive. I think, unfortunately, that's the bald truth of the matter. It must remain on the table as a last resort, particularly when you look at, I mean, They have spoken in the past about criminalizing ransomware payments in general across the board for everyone. That doesn't appear to be the direction they're taking at the moment. And I know Kieran Martin and I fully disagree on this. We've sat and had a long chat about it. But now they're specifically talking about public bodies, right? Banning ransomware payments. They can do it without, I guess, without laws. They could just say, no, we don't pay ransoms. But if you're, the slide's not there anymore. Pretend you can still see the name Synovis on the board. If you're Synovis, right, and people are dying because you're not paying the ransom, and yet you're not allowed to pay the ransom, the only outcome of that is that people continue to die. I understand that financing cybercrime is a net negative and something we should never do. But we shouldn't allow people to die either. And if you're going to look at the ethical side of that argument, you have to look at the extremes. And the extreme at one end is people die, which is not acceptable. Wow, what a note, people die, the end. Like, someone asked me about crappy 80s rock music or something. That'd be much. Thank you very much.